Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Today we must talk about bone loss, especially in women. When women stop their periods and begin to have bone loss, we act as though this is inevitable, and it really is not inevitable. It's extremely important to talk about why Western women fail to keep bone after menopause. And I think we really have it. I think we've got a bunch of it figured out. It's a lot of stuff, though, so let's go through it. The idea of bone loss in women after menopause is based on a ton of things. It's usually based on something you're not getting that you need and something you're getting that you shouldn't have, which is a toxin or a poison. So let's go through all of it that works for bone loss and talk about how to measure it. The first thing that you got to know about bone loss is measuring it. There is a DEXA scan, and a DEXA scan is an x-ray where they x-ray your hip and your spine and your pelvis, and they compare them to each other, the spinal bone, pelvic bone, and hip socket bone of the femur. And they compare that to thousands of women your age and gender in something called a Z-score or a T-score. In most times it's a T-score. And so that's something we don't have for men, but we don't really need it. So when women get it done, they have a comparison that's really quite helpful. And year after year, bone loss after bone loss, it just seems like nothing helps. And I've seen so many women go through this, and I've also seen a number of women stop it and really fix it. So the great measure would be that your DEXA density reverses, and you year over year you gain bone density. That would be the ideal if you've lost some. And if you haven't lost some, you don't want to lose any. You want to stay right in that normal range of healthy, strong women. So your question is probably going to be, well, if I get one DEXA bone scan a year, which is an x-ray, then what do I do in between to know if I'm right? Otherwise, I'm just tracking my own demise, and that's true. So my favorite thing is Genova Laboratory has a lipid peroxide test, which is a urine test, and it tests for a couple of compounds that are important for bone loss. Pyridinolines and pyridines are some things that are involved when you lose bone. If you're digesting your own bone and you pee it out of your body, you're gonna know through this urine test. So if you've got a regimen and you think it's working, like you've got a plant-based diet and you're eating high protein powder and you feel like you're right on and you're getting vitamin D and you're taking supplements and you think you're great, which is what most women do, and then you do that urine test and it shows that you're spilling bone metabolites out of your kidneys, then that probably means you're not going to be adding bone to your DEXA scan annually when you do your annual DEXA scan. I think that it would be wise to do that every few months. Make sure that your plan is working, because some people are in modern medicine and alternative medicine, some people have this plan and they're married to the perfect plan, but it doesn't work, or they don't measure it. And so if you don't measure it, you don't know if it works. You might think it's perfect, and it might be according to the guidelines of some agency or some group or some guru or some doctor, or even it worked for Sally next door, but it didn't work for you, because there's differences between people. So let's go through what you can do to make sure that the urine test and the bone test are reversing and you're depositing bone into your calcium into your bone and protein into your bone. And that's really our next point. You've got protein that you must deposit in the bone, and you've got calcium and minerals that you must deposit into the bone. It isn't just protein. It's collagen, which is a mix of different kinds of proteins, and it's also a bunch of minerals, not just calcium and magnesium. It's other minerals, including trace minerals. And there's like 70 different trace minerals that we all have to have that come from the earth and from the oceans and from different salt mines and stuff like that. So it's important to get a good mineral supplement and to make sure that you're eating enough protein. The big problem with protein powders is that a lot of people that want to buy a clean plant-based protein powder end up eating pea powder that comes from peas. And the lectins in peas are a real problem for a lot of people. Or they get some kind of whey protein, and the problems with whey, cow-based milk proteins and whey irritate a lot of people's immune systems and guts. So you'd have to spend a lot of money to get fractionated, isolated whey protein that's been processed a whole lot to break it down so it doesn't seem antigenic. So it's just raw amino acid proteins at its barest form. It's just like bare bricks. It doesn't have any resemblance to the original cow that it came from. Whether it's the A1 cows or the A2 protein cows, some people really just can't handle that dairy protein. So you might have to find that you get fractionated whey or isolated whey or other types of processed whey, and it costs twice as much. These can be $50 bins of whey powder that you're putting in your smoothies or something. The other thing is if you're making smoothies and you're thinking I'm putting protein powder in my smoothies, even if it's collagen powder from bones and from bones and meat, which are less allergenic than the milk part of a cow, that might be succeeding. However, you might be mixing it with a bunch of green vegetables. You might be putting in spinach or kale or broccoli or Brussels sprouts or something. And if you put in those green vegetables, you're going to get oxalic acids, you're going to get oxalates, you're going to get other anti-nutrients that will pull these proteins and minerals and B vitamins out of your digestive tract and ultimately out of your bone. So no green smoothies, no green drinks, no oxalates, no pea powder, and no dairy powder, but cow powder might be okay. And it's because the cow hooves and tendons and ligaments and bone are not as antigenic as the milk. It's just the different chemicals that are in the different proteins that are in the dairy that comes out of the udder is different than what's in their bones, muscles, meat, and organs. It's a different synthesis. And the ones that come out of the udder can be highly allergenic to certain people. So you're going to have to consider minerals, different protein powder, different shakes that don't involve any oxalate or green vegetables. The next thing you're going to have to think about is the idea of macros. Macros is the protein, fat, carbohydrate ratio. Many people are eating way too much carbohydrates. Now, if you're eating a lot of fruit, that can usually be okay for a lot of carnivores, according to Paul Saladino and a bunch of other carnivores, but some people can't do that. Some people will eat so much fruit that they're eating way too many carbohydrates compared to their fat level. So the general rule of thumb, if you want to have strong bone, is try to aim for about half of your calories a day from fat. So that means that, if you've got a 2,000 calorie day, 1,000 calories should come from fat. And if it's 9 calories per gram, it's pretty easy to calculate how many grams of fat you should be getting, hundreds. So you've got to make sure that you're getting fat and oil and all the right kind of stuff that works for you, not seed oil. We're not talking about peanut oil. We're not talking about sunflower, safflower. We're not talking about cottonseed oil. We're not talking about sesame oil. These are not good oils for the oxidative stress that they bring because they require so much processing. It isn't the omega-6s or the omega-3s, it's the oxidative stress that comes from stripping and defatting and deodorizing and decolorizing and heating the oil with acid and heat like 5 to 10 times to get it to last on a shelf in a glass bottle. So those seed oils don't do very well. So pick things like bacon grease, steak fat, chicken fat, schmaltz, egg yolks from healthy eggs that have had chickens that have been eating, worms and grubs and grass. Make sure that you're thinking about butter, very good quality butter or ghee. That would be a good source of these correct fats to keep your bone. The problem with people that are not eating enough fat or that are not getting enough calories, if you're cutting your calories, a number of women are about 200 calories less than what they need for their energy in the day. And if that's the case, you're going to cannibalize your muscle very quickly. So you get this sarcopenia, which is a loss of muscle, and then you get skinny fat, where your body fat percentage is high, but your muscle is low, and you've lost a bunch of muscle. That happens in the Ozempic family of drugs, the GLP-1 inhibitor family, and it's a real big problem because the drugs are even worse than what will happen if you're a high carbohydrate diet with low fat, and you have too few calories for your energy consumption. So if you have 200 or 300 too fewer calories, every day you're stripping some muscle away because it's really rapid and easy for us to strip away the protein in our muscles and burn it as glucose. So you don't want to get in that stuck spot where you're losing muscle mass. So learn to measure your body fat percentage with calipers. You can measure under your arm, around your abdomen. There's a bunch of places where you can measure. You can buy one of those for $12 online and learn how to do it in just a few minutes. You need to do more than one site on your body, and it tells you where to do it and how to do it properly. You can also do an electrical device, which is the scales that people stand on and hold with their hands, and it measures electrical current through their upper body and their lower body, and it measures the electrical resistivity and shows you what your body fat percentage is by averaging your upper and lower body, which can be very important because our bodies are different, upper and lower, and we have to average those to get a better number. So watch out for this sarcopenia, this loss of muscle because you don't have enough calories or you're taking some bad drugs. These are the things that are really important. I also think that we really need to take a blood test for vitamin D. If a person doesn't have a blood test for vitamin D, they really don't know what their status is. And I don't think that the answer to low vitamin D is to take vitamin D supplements. I do like organ meat pills, and organ meat pills contain a lot of fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, and many, many other things, like B vitamins. However, I think that we know it's pretty clear that dietary cholesterol and saturated fat plus sunlight, ultraviolet light, is what yields and results in healthy vitamin D levels. So I want to see everybody in my life at 60 or above. If you're at 30, you're in real trouble. That's about where the normal level begins in blood, but it's just not enough. So you might find yourself at 32 or 35 and say, yay, I'm normal. No, it's not normal. It's too low. It's like having low blood pressure. It's just not a good thing. So I think it's important for us to get enough UV sunlight. Realize that we get UV light at the peak of the sun during the day, highest around noon and the hours around noon. And that UV ultraviolet is the thing that everybody's scared of, that they think they need to put sunscreen on for. And while it is possible to burn, and it is possible to get skin cancers, you're much more likely to be healthy if you've got saturated fat in your diet, if you've got minerals in your diet, if you've got a lot of infrared light throughout the day, which means getting out in the earlier morning and afternoon and evening, and being out under an umbrella and getting indirect reflected sunlight. You'll get a lot less ultraviolet, and you'll get a lot more infrared. Also realize that you're not going to get any infrared through glass. You're not going to get the infrared or UV through auto glass in your car. You're not going to get it through glass in your home, domestic window glass. It blocks all of that. So you're not going to get anything to speak of. So it's really important to get outside. And if you can prime your body with infrared light, you'll be ready to receive ultraviolet light and convert it into vitamin D. You know, people with whiter skin can get by with about 15 minutes a day of ultraviolet light. If you're darker, you need a lot more, and you need to have a lot more skin exposed, depending on where you live on the planet. But there's differences among our different Fitzpatrick scores on how our skin is toned, and our eye color, our hair color, all that stuff really matters. We'll talk about that in another video. So if you're going to be healthy with regard to bone, we've talked about everything except hormones. Now, the next step is sex hormones and the hormones of stress. If you've got a high amount of cortisol, or if you've got depleted adrenal glands and you've got very low cortisol, you may well have depleted sex hormones, which are important for bone. That means testosterone, estrogen 1, 2, and 3 in humans, and progesterone and DHEA and certain other hormones like sex hormone binding globulin. So you can test for sex hormone binding globulin in blood. It's a protein that carries your sex hormones around and delivers it in the body. You can also check those sex hormones in urine or saliva. I like that a lot. In blood, it's often not terribly accurate. If it's low in blood, you're in trouble, and you probably need some bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Talk to your favorite doctor about that. However, I like to use urine and saliva. My favorite, I tend to like Dutch Laboratory, which does urine, and I tend to really like that. I've also used saliva quite a bit for patients, and that can work too. You're looking at collections of 4 or 5 times in a 24-hour period to look at the circadian rhythm of your cortisol, which should be high in the morning and low the rest of the time, and also the measures of your sex hormones. Because if you don't have those right, you're going to have bone loss. And many people do well, especially after menopause, with some kind of bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, some kind of troche, or some kind of oral lozenge, some people use vaginal suppositories, some people use implants right now. There's just all kinds of ways to get bioidentical. I'm not a big fan of the non-bioidentical artificial hormones. I don't like what that does, and I don't like what the literature says about it. So that's just my own opinion. I think that you also have to realize that there's been some real capture of the medical literature. So if you're looking at osteoporosis drugs, and there's a whole class of osteoporosis drugs that are terribly toxic and poison, and they cause really bad problems in the hips and pelvis. I'm not going to name them all right now, but I will say that there is a great deal of drugs that are out there that people want to rely on for osteoporosis, and I'm not a fan. I think there's usually a root cause way of fixing this stuff. There's always going to be somebody that needs some kind of drug or thinks they need some kind of drug, but I want to go after the root cause. I want to look at hormones. I want to look at all this other stuff. And then lastly, I want to end on toxins. If a person has heavy metal exposure, if they've got glyphosate exposure, if they've got Roundup, if they've got other pesticides, herbicides, organophosphates, if they've got fire retardant chemicals, PFAS and PFAS chemicals, PFAS, PFOS, if they've got the dry cleaning chemicals from dry cleaners. These are really problems for the metabolism of bone and for other types of brain trouble. So you'll get problems with bone and brain and immune system. So really look at dental implants, things that are in your mouth. Look at fillings, look at root canals, look at chemical exposures. There are great laboratories you can do to test for the pesticides and herbicides and hair metals. You can do urine tests for a lot of toxins, and you can also find, I've had a number of patients, especially female patients, that were exposed to mold. And the mold mycotoxins that are off-gassed by mold, even if it doesn't live in your body, can really cause bone loss and the metabolism of bone. Really, all inflammation and even bad sleep can cause bone loss. Oxidative stress can cause bone loss. So doing a urine test for 8-hydroxydeoxyguanosine is one of the greatest tests these days for antioxidant effects to find out how much oxidative stress you have. In fact, we even see oxidative stress in people that have problems with oxidative phosphorylation. They've got brain waves that have low amplitude. So they've got the skinny little brain waves that the therapist says, you've got the brain waves of an addict or somebody with low energy with poor production of ATP. This is an oxidative stress problem. So that person would need oxidative stress help like N-acetylcysteine. You'll see the bone loss show up in the mouth too. You'll see it in the loss of bone around the tooth, in loss of enamel, loss of bone sockets in the socket that holds the tooth. You'll see gum recession. You'll see all kinds of dental problems, and you'll see changes in the spine. Chiropractors will see people with a dowager's hump, where they're hunched over because of their thoracic spine losing bone density. You'll see compressive bone fractures, compression fractures, where people's bones just crush and they fall and bend over. So going to your chiropractor, going to your holistic dentist, going to these natural alternative doctors, in many cases, we can look at the root causes and really, really, truly reverse this. If a person's had these problems, it can be reversible, but we're talking about months to years of rehab and help. But I'm telling you, I've done it in patients, and if you've got 3 years, it can be a huge difference. I've had patients in their 80s and 90s that spend 3 years really remodeling their lives, and they're different people. And they're glad they did it, especially when they realized that they were going to live a lot longer than they originally thought.